Okay, despite some minor technical difficulties, like an airline, we're going to thank you for your patience, even though we kind of just took it from you. Nate, well, please tell us all how to run an effective Lightning node.
Good morning. Yeah, so my name's Nate. I work at Voltage, and I've just been obsessed with the Lightning Network for... Turn your mic on.
Hello.
Okay, cool. So my name's Nate. For those that don't know me, I've worked at Voltage for a couple of years, and I've been obsessed with the Lightning Network in general for, almost 4 years now. Running Lightning nodes and stuff, I'm just constantly in awe of the ability to send as much or as little value as you want to anywhere in the world instantly. So I've learned a lot about running a Lightning node, and I've come to a few conclusions, which are kind of just an opinion, but I think Bitcoiners should be running Lightning nodes. And I'm going to talk about how to get started. So it's sort of like a beginner to intermediate level sort of talk, but hopefully it will inspire some of you to start nodes. And for those that are already running nodes, maybe you'll learn a thing or two. So why did I call this talk how to run an effective node instead of how to run a routing node? Well, I believe effective is a subjective thing. People can run a Lightning node without, having the goal of being some big hub node on the network and still, reach your goals. But we're going to talk about a few things here. I'm not going to just read this off the screen, but I'm always inspired by this image and watching it grow. Every couple of months I look at it and say, wow, the Lightning node, the Lightning network is it's really something else. And it reminds me of just the network, the internet in general, when it was coming out and the lights start coming on. So it's a lot like the real internet of money. So, okay, so you're a Bitcoiner, you decide to start a node, maybe you turn it on for the first time. This talk is going to be implementation agnostic. It's going to be fairly generalized and just about specific Lightning networks, so I'm not going to be addressing specifically LND or anything. But I believe that one of the best things you can do before starting is to set some goals. And I think that for those that are just getting started with the Lightning Network, a good goal may be to open a channel, buy a gift card. We have BitRefill and the Bitcoin Company and Paxful and stuff for a reason. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So I think there's 4 main types of nodes that people are going to be wanting to run. Hobbyist education is what a lot of folks, including myself, started as. I just want to open a channel, I want to see what it's all about. I believe Bitcoiners are naturally curious, so maybe a lot of you have already gotten to sort of that point before. And then there's those that want to spend their Bitcoin on things and not have to wait for confirmations and want to, not have to worry about custodians rubbing you. So you can start a node for spending, and then you can start a node for routing. That's the most challenging type, but over time, a node that just started as a spending node could become a routing node over time. And then sort of the merchant or receiver style, which is actually fairly challenging because we'll be talking about inbound liquidity a little bit, but that's the other type. So it's important to make some decisions when you're starting, and I've defined these into short, medium, and long term. And a lot of questions that you should probably be figuring out is how much Bitcoin you want to allocate. Some people here might have 20 Bitcoin or something, and maybe they're okay throwing 2 Bitcoin into the Lightning node. And some people might just have 20 million sats as part of their Bitcoin stash. So this is all going to be proportional and subjective based on what you want to do. But just like you don't recommend someone who's never bought Bitcoin to throw their whole life savings into Bitcoin, you probably don't want to throw your whole Bitcoin stash into your Lightning node when you're first getting started either. And then there's channels. So channels are interesting. When you probably want to, we're going to be talking about it, but you want to decide how many channels you want to start with, and then your inbound liquidity strategy. So here's some examples. Those that want to start don't have to do all of these, but here's just some examples of a short-term goal, right? Maybe a short-term goal is, let's acquire some inbound liquidity. Let's open 5 to 10 channels with good peers. We'll talk about peers here in a little bit. And maybe you want to see if your node can forward a payment or 2 per day. And then you also want to learn how to send and receive. So that's a good short-term goal on your first Lightning node. And then over time, one of the sort of easiest to understand ways to know if your node is decent or not is on a website run by Lightning Labs called terminal.lightning.engineering, and they have the 6 checkmark health check screen when you look up a node in. We'll go over that screen here in a second, but you should be able to achieve that 6 screen checkmark healthy status by 6 months usually. And yeah, so total node balance, we'll be talking about that, but medium-term goal, maybe get 30%, or at least 5 payments per day, and maybe get up to 20 channels. And then long-term, maybe you want to rank up on the terminal website. Again, you don't have to worry about this unless you really, really want to. It's kind of gamified, but this is sort of some long-term goals, maybe, and maybe you want to get 50% of your node to have inbound liquidity for 20 payments or more per day. Have 30 channels. That is a heck of a node right there. So yeah, so we were just talking about terminal web. So this is kind of an arbitrary thing, but it's kind of the best we have right now as sort of determining what nodes are quote unquote healthy on the network. You really don't want to allocate your capital towards nodes that are unstable, that go offline all the time, that have channels that go offline all the time either. So this is kind of a good way to look at that. So again, that's terminal.lightning.engineering, and you can sort of see a ranking board for that. And I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. There's a lot to get through in 45 minutes. All right, let's talk about something fun. So Lightning Network privacy. I'm not going to get totally in the weeds on this, but when you are first starting your Lightning node, a simple mistake could quote unquote dox your whole node to a KYC exchange or something. So if you care about that, it depends on your threat model personally. Some people don't care, some people do. But if you do care, don't open a channel with a UTXO that you took from a KYC exchange. They will know what your node is, at least with the current way of opening channels, because it's 202 multi-sig. It's very obvious that you are opening a channel. So that KYC exchange will be like, oh, that's your node. And you can take that threat model as far as you want. Don't send funds from a closed channel. So you close your channel down, and then you send them directly to a KYC exchange. They will also know that you run that node probably. And when you're receiving, your node pub key is in the standard invoice. So if the person or entity that is paying you knows your real name, knows your address or something, they'll be able to see what your node is. And there's a few other sort of gotchas here. So IP addresses, if you're not using Tor only and you really want to use ClearNet, look into something like WireGuard if you can. You really don't want to use your home IP address if you are privacy focused. And also there's entities out there that use a authentication login mechanism that is your Lightning node. They might be logging your IP address also, so watch out for that. And consider using collaborative transaction only UTXO. This is another thing that is kind of complex and unfortunate. As you can tell, if you care about privacy, the challenge just got about 10x harder. So keep an eye out for that. Collaborative transaction UTXOs. Things like Join Market are great for this. If you have a Start9 embassy or something, well, they don't call it the embassy anymore, but if you have a Start9, they have something called Jam on there, which is really cool to do this with. So just to boil it down, sending is inherently more private than receiving, especially with the full 11 invoices. And another thing that you might want to consider is if you are paying somebody directly, it's a better privacy gain to not open a direct channel with them, but instead to open up a channel with maybe a peer that they have, so you can get that degree of separation. So just a few tips, before you start running your node. But if you don't care about privacy, you can ignore everything I talked about. Okay, so here's the meat and potatoes, right? Lightning liquidity. So for those that don't know, this is a graphic from ln.guide. And in this graphic, essentially, Alice wants to pay Dan, but Alice doesn't have a channel with Dan, so this might be a refresher for some of you. But Alice is channel Bob, Bob is channel Carol, Carol is channel Dan. So the Lightning Network routes the 10,000 sat payment through these channels. And the core component when I teach people this is that recognize how to route the payment. Like Bob needs 2 channels, okay? He needs one to receive into and one to send out of. And the one that he sends out of is where he collects the fee, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's just a really good visualization of sort of how routing works. We're going to come back to this graphic here in a sec, though. Here's another one I really like from Bitcoin Design. It's very similar to an abacus. So we have green girl, right, has 2 channels, with blue girl and purple girl or pink girl. And what's important here is that the amount of liquidity or the amount of circles or whatever in this graphic is really what defines what's possible as far as moving payments around. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty on this here in a second. So, like for example, if green girl wants to pay blue girl, she can only pay 1 circle, right? 1 whatever that is, 1 Satoshi, I guess. But blue girl can pay, what was that, 7. But if pink girl wants to pay blue girl, well, actually, that's probably not right. Let's do orange guy is trying to pay pink girl. No, orange guy is trying to pay green girl, right? So that would likely work because he's got 7 there, and it sort of moves over. Per 7 goes over there, and the blue girl collects a fee. So it's very similar to this one here. So this is just kind of a refresher of sort of how Lightning works, and we're going to be talking about this in a more applicable context here in a second. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing really good. Is there any questions so far? I'll take like 2 or 3 minutes if there's any questions so far.
What? Keep going.
All right.
We're going to do questions.
I'm actually doing pretty well on time here, so. Appreciate it. Testing. Okay, we're good. Any questions from the audience? All right, I guess I'm doing pretty well. Looks like. Thanks, Walter. You're welcome. Now I'll ask again here in a few minutes, but let's go over the next topic here. So we understand the basics of liquidity. We understand maybe what our short-term goal is. We understand how much Bitcoin we want to allocate to our node, at least at the beginning. Now, who do we open a channel? It's another decision we have to figure out. So a few things before you just hop in there, a few things to keep in mind is that a lot of this is going to change. We've got things like splicing and stuff that is probably right around the corner. And so this talk might be outdated fairly quickly. However, as the Lightning Network works right now, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And as you can imagine, as the purchase power of Bitcoin increases, the value of your channels will also increase. So a 5 million sat channel today is like, it's the value can move is a lot less than as Bitcoin's value goes up. And this is important to keep in mind because running a Lightning node is sort of an investment in the future. I think it's very similar to how a lot of people, I don't want to generalize everyone, but one of the big arguments on how to get normal people to buy Bitcoin is, well, if you think that Bitcoin only has a 1% chance to succeed, maybe putting 1% of your investment portfolio into Bitcoin is a good idea. And I kind of believe in that same way with the Lightning Network, right? If you think the Lightning Network only has a 1% chance to be the global payment rails, maybe taking 1% of your Bitcoin stash and starting a node might benefit you in the future, because it's an asymmetric thing. Lightning Network isn't just going to be some kooky network in the next 20 years. It's either going to take over the global financial rails, or it's probably going to just fizzle out.
Nate, you make the point that the value of the Lightning channel will increase, or could increase over time, as the value of the Bitcoin increases over time, and so too will the fiat cost of opening a channel, theoretically, right? If we're at the same number of sats per VWAP, then the channel cost in fiat terms is going to increase over time as well.
Yeah, this is why I believe it's sort of I don't want to say the walls are closing in, but the walls are closing in. If you think Bitcoin's value is going up, that's really good if you already have a Lightning node going. It's really bad if you don't yet. So consider that. Okay, first channel. If you open up one channel to the biggest hub on the network, which I think is like Wallet of Satoshi or something right now, your payments are probably going to go through, but they might not. Just having one channel doesn't guarantee that your payments are going to work. So when you're first starting, you might want to consider taking, let's see, if you want to just put 10 million sats into the Lightning Network when you first start, maybe break that up into 5 2 million sat channels to some big nodes to sort of spread out your reach when you start. And it's a good rule of thumb where if you want to spend and you want to buy a $200 Amazon gift card, if you just open up a channel worth $200 and spend it, that's great. You got some inbound liquidity, which we'll talk about here in a second. But you might as well just have used on-chain at that point. You're not. The really cool thing about the Lightning networking channels is the ability to spend multiple times with the channel. So consider your sizing based on how you plan to use it. Then that's kind of what I said at the bottom there. It's just not efficient to do that. So maybe a good rule of thumb is okay, I'm going to buy an Amazon gift card for $200 once a week. So maybe I'll open a $1,000 worth channel, and then as that sort of drains out as I spend, I'll open another and another, and eventually the node will grow. Another thing though, if you do have the Bitcoin to make bigger channels have less competition to route bigger payments, which makes sense, right? If the average channel size out there on the Lightning Network is 1 million sats, the competition to route payments less than that is pretty high. But if you have a big channel and you can route a 5 million sat payment, there's less channels on the network that can do that. It's sort of this range. So just keep that in mind too. So in my opinion, at least right now, based on Bitcoin's current sort of purchase power, less than 5 million sats is kind of a small channel. Okay, so choosing your first peers. Incomplete information, but we have to find a way to weed out and filter the bad ones. So 6 screen checks in terminal web is a good start. Nodes that have steady growth, you can look at ambos.space to see how their growth has been. Centrality in betweenness can be useful, but it's not a deal breaker. So a centrality score is like how many friends they have. It's like this mathematical function, but it's basically how many routes on the network does your node touch. But that's not necessarily completely known to the outside network, but it's something that is presented on terminal web. You can use to help filter, but it's not really a deal breaker. And then you can also check the peers of the node that you're looking to open up a channel with. You can do this on Amboss and see, for example, if you want to open up a 10 million stat channel and you see a potential peer on terminal web that has 6 green checks, but their average channel size is like 1 million sats or something, maybe that's too big of a channel to open to get the most out of your capital. So again, yeah, so there's terminal web again. So node is online. So like if you're trying to reach this, right, node is online. This is very, very important. The Lightning Network only works if you're online, and it only works if your peer is online. Plenty of channels. This is arbitrary. You can get this check mark with 15 channels around there. Good routing capacity. This is, you can click these links on terminal web and see what this means. But good routing capacity means your channel sizes aren't minuscule, basically. Healthy channels. This is basically defined as your channels with peers that also have the 6 green check marks, basically. And then channel stability, which is very similar to your node is online. It's just the channel is stable, not turning offline. Because what's going to happen is nodes out there that are trying to make payments on the network, they're going to, part of how they choose to route the payment is using historical data. So if they try to send the payment through through a route that has historically worked, and then it fails, this kind of hurts channel stability a little bit. So it's important to stay online and keep your channels stable. And good peers, this is also defined as 6 green checks. This is actually not hard to get. It's really not that hard to get 6 green checks, so don't consider this like super challenging. It's staying online and just, it's fun to open up channels with your friends and stuff, but if you want to have a node that's sort of healthy, it's important to have channels with other healthy nodes. So Amboss is a really, really good spot to look at other information. I'm a big fan of average channel size, looking at that, because you want to decide the size of channel that you're going to open before you sort of open it. So if I want to open up a 5 million stat channel, in theory, I kind of want to open it up with a node that's an average channel size of more than that. I don't want to be bottlenecked with the amount of payments I can forward. And there's so many nodes out there to choose from that I could be that picky. Another thing that you might want to look at is average age of the channels that are on that node, and also the oldest channel. So nodes that have been out there and stable for a longer period of time, more likely to be good peers. And we'll talk about fee rates here in a little bit. This is another thing to keep in mind. All of this is public information. The Lightning Network gossips like 90% of everything about the Lightning node to begin with. So Amboss really aggregates this stuff for you. But another thing to look at is, let's go through this. So this is the voltage node. And if I want to open up a channel to the voltage node, maybe I want to see what their fee distribution is. So we're going to be talking about fees here in a second, but basically all this is saying is that of all the channels, this is what voltage is setting their fee rate at, this one here on the left. And on the right, that's the one that their peers are generally setting the fee rate at. And this is important because if you open up a channel to them, you are giving them inbound, and they will set a fee rate similar, likely similar, you don't know for sure, to what's here on the left. So if they set it very high, there's a good possibility that that channel won't be routing payments and stuff. So this is really like kind of trial and error on a lot of it. But if I saw this node and the outgoing fee distribution was like over 1,000, like if I saw a lot of those bars over 1,000, I might be slightly hesitant to open up a channel with them because I'm not sure if I'll get any routing from them. But we'll talk about fees a little bit more. I'm doing on time. Okay, so there's two things here. So if after you get your 10 channels, you can decide to open up peers in 2 different ways. You can try to increase your node's reach to the network. If you want to do this, a good rule of thumb is to avoid opening channels with peers that your peers have channels to, if that makes sense. So that's just like a degree of separation, so you can expand reach. Now, if you're trying to undercut or try to make shorter routes to destinations that are likely receiving more than sending, you might want to actually open up a channel with a peer of a peer. That way there you can sort of bypass, or other payments on the network can bypass the original peer. I'll demonstrate that here in a second, make it a little bit easier. And also you can have a mix of peer types. If you're just opening up channels to hubs that are over 1,000 channels, those other people, those other nodes that have channels to them are your competition, and they can undercut you. So it's really important to sort of have a mix of flow if you're really trying to optimize your node. So I want to talk about this again here. So what I talked about earlier about like cutting someone off. So instead of Alice doing this, Alice can instead open up a channel with Carol, bypass Bob completely, and since Dan is likely a node that is receiving often, this is a way that you can sort of optimize your routing incomes, finding ways to shorten the path of routes. So I just wanted to illustrate that because that was kind of confusing. Okay. Inbound. So in this demonstration, this node, the green represents inbound liquidity, the amount that they can receive, which means that peer on the right, whatever peer that is allocate capital in that direction, and then the outbound. What's important to remember is that as of today, you can only receive routing fees when your channels go from outbound to inbound. When it goes from inbound to outbound, that's your peer getting a fee, unless they're making a payment. But if they're routing it, then they're getting the fee. So something like this, these peers probably don't like you very much, but if your channel, the top channel there is with a high destination node, you are likely going to be earning fees as payments come in through those white arrows and move out through those outbound, through the outbound channel. This is a big presentation. I'll give you guys 2 minutes if anyone has any burning questions. Ellie? I see Ellie. You can scream. You can scream. I'll repeat what you're saying, don't worry.
You talked about privacy, but how do I make sure that the channel I'm connecting to is not KYC?
It's not what?
It's not KYC. Or is it private?
Right, so I didn't really distinguish. I didn't really distinguish between a public and an unannounced channel. So you're saying that the peer is KYC, or I don't really understand. Like who's KYC in this scenario?
You talked about privacy, but then when you talked about how you choose your peers, then like how do you make sure that those connections are private?
So if you're paying the peer, sorry, Ellen.
Sorry, we get a mic too.
Thanks, Walton.
Okay, thanks. When opening new channels, how do you make sure that that's private?
Private from who, I guess is my question. Like your peer. But what data could they get is like what I'm saying. If no one's KYC'd in this situation. Like I don't mind opening up channels, public channels with exchanges because my node, they can't tie my identity to it unless I actually send them an invoice from my node or something and they already have my KYC information.
Okay, so it's okay to open channels as long as you don't send direct invoices from you. No. Okay.
That's a good rule of thumb. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. No problem. You're good.
We're all set.
Okay. Okay, so how do you get your inbound liquidity? I recommend low time preference. There are many expensive ways to get inbound liquidity, and remember, getting inbound liquidity is the equivalent of getting somebody else to allocate capital to your node. So how do you incentivize people to do that? Or how do you at least get that in some way? My opinion, the easiest way is to be spending your sats. You could spend or replace. I know people don't like spending, but getting inbound liquidity off of your node is a very nice little kickback for spending with your node. And then, as you get more inbound over time, open up more channels. Before you know it, you're going to be routing payments, and it's going to be a decent little node on the network. And as it becomes a decent node on the network, you're going to see other people on the network start opening up channels to you without you even asking, which is phenomenal. But if you need inbound fast, like you're a merchant and receiving a lot, you're like, oh no, like I need my customers' payments to succeed. You can do things like purchase liquidity or lease liquidity off of services like agnostic, Lightning Pool if you're using LND, or liquidity ads if you're using CLN. And you can just go to these providers and you can just say, look at their order board and say, all right, I will quote unquote buy 5 million sats of inbound for how much, and there's a process for doing that. You can also use the submarine swap services such as Loop or Bolts, and this is a way of getting inbound where you're sending a service provider a Lightning payment, which reduces your outbound and gives you inbound. They take a small cut of that and then they send that back to you on chain. So that's another way. But there are many, many, many ways, many more than I can cover in this. So the PlugNet wiki is phenomenal at this. So if you want to make a note of that, PlugNet.wiki/wiki, getting inbound liquidity is phenomenal for that. All right, node and channel balance. So this is like one of the biggest hangups people have when they're starting a node. They're like, oh man, I gotta do these rebalances and all this stuff. And it's really not that bad. But at the end of the day, it's better to have a node on the left than on the right on here, right? Especially if you want to sort of rank up on the network, you want to try to have a node that has fairly equally distributed outbound and inbound as much as possible. It's never going to be perfect. So circular rebalance. So I have a spicy take on this. I think circular rebalances, which are essentially you paying yourself to sort of move liquidity around, is a bad idea probably over 90% of the time. And so to sort of put that into context, imagine, let's talk about a very simple example. You have two channels, one really heavy outbound, one really heavy inbound. And you want to move some of that outbound into that other channel to balance them. So what you do is you create something called a self-payment, circular balance, call it whatever you want, but it's going to route through the network, so you're going to be paying routing fees before the payment gets back to you. So the big question is that a waste of money? So if let's get into it here. So imagine this example. I hope you guys can see this. It's a little bit small. The big question you have to ask yourself is, what fee rate do I have to set to at least break even if this channel sort of drains out from outbound to inbound? And it's a simple equation, but it's kind of the fee that you're paying divided by the amount that you're rebalancing times 1,000,000, because it's ppm, parts per million, is the fee rate that you should set if you want to break even on that channel moving. But this last part, a lot of people don't realize. If you're moving outbound from a channel that is likely going to earn fees anyway, by forcing liquidity out of that channel, you are losing potential gains on that channel. Okay, so if I've got the channel that's heavy on outbound with like bit refill or something that it's going to, naturally drain from, or naturally, I'm going to be forwarding payments. If I decide to just brute force that liquidity into another channel, I'm essentially losing whatever forwarding payments on that channel I could have had. So that's something also to really keep in mind. Only do this with channels that you don't think are going to be routing payments very much. Node balance is similar to channel balance, but node balance is just your total inbound ratio to your total outbound. This is from Thunder Hub, but it's the remote and local balance are neck and neck, right? This is a pretty solid node sort of balance that you would want to see. And if you have too much outbound, you can do something like loop out. You buy something. If you have too much inbound, you can open more channels to sort of bring the total node balance in line.
Nate, what does it mean to have too much inbound or outbound? Should you have an even balance between the two?
So I recommend keeping an eye out for when you hit the 70-30 ratio either direction. So if you've got 70% of your total capacity is outbound, you should probably look into getting some more inbound. And if it's 70% around inbound, then you should probably open some more channels.
And do you think that's based on the type of user as well? Like maybe if you're a merchant, you want more inbound than outbound, or?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, based on your volume needs, if you're a merchant, you would want to have a certain amount of inbound. For merchants, I recommend 1.5 times what your expected volume is to compensate for if you have like a ton of sales or something. And that's on a monthly basis. So every month, you can take your previous month income, multiply that by 1.5, and make sure you have enough inbound for that month. That way there you don't have to babysit it all the time. We want to avoid babysitting these things as much as possible. This example is strictly if you are trying to rank up your routing node and contribute to the network in that sort of efficient way. But yes, good looking out, Walton. Okay, there's two types of fees that you can earn and pay on the Lightning Network for routing. Base fee, pretty simple. It's a flat fee regardless of the amount being forwarded, and a fee rate is a percentage, often defined as parts per million, of the amount being forwarded. So there's two real strategies. I'm going to kind of accelerate a little bit, unfortunately. If you have questions later, just let me know. But what I want to look at is this here. So the general concept is if you've got heavy outbound, what you want to do to maximize your fee rate or to maximize your fee income on this channel is to try to find the sweet point to sort of write it out. So if you, there's two ways to really do this at the start. You can either start really low, and as you are routing payments, you generally increase the fee up until it becomes max inbound. This helps your node stay balanced. It helps the possibility of flowing back into the outbound side, and is generally the default strategy for most channels that are not going to be like really known to drain out hard. For example, if I open up a channel to the Lightning Labs loop node, I am not going to do this. I'm gonna start very high and try to find the sweet point by coming down. But if I'm just opening a node to a channel to a node that is I think it's just a routing node, maybe we'll see, we're not entirely sure. You can start low and work your way up, or you can start a little bit higher and try to find that balance point before going back up. I've talked to people that do both of these. It really depends on how much you want to sort of watch it when you first open. This way is better if you just kind of want to open it and maybe come back in a few days. Keenan.
Does the fact that gossip propagation isn't instant?
Sorry, just one moment. I'm going to mic to you.
Does the fact that gossip propagation takes a bunch of time or is unreliable change your approach to this strategy? Because my understanding is that if you increase fees over time, if a node is not up to date on your new fee schedule, and they try to include the old fee, then your payment will get bounced because it doesn't pay enough fee,
Right.
and that causes a payment failure to be associated with your node, which deranks it, at least in the eyes of the payment sender.
Completely correct. So whenever you change a fee rate or change anything, some sort of state on your node, not the entire network, but the network that is using your node as a route needs to know about this. So if you change a fee rate and 10 seconds later someone tries to use that route and it's different, that payment's not going to go through because the origin doesn't know that's changed yet.
Only if you increase it.
Only if you increase it. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Decreasing it is safe because the sender will offer a fee rate that is higher than what you are charged or what you accept.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean I have that here in this little quick fee rate thing. So like if you're just if it's something that's like really scary, right? You open a channel, you put 1,000 ppm, you think that's fine, and then all of a sudden it's like super draining, like pop that thing up, as quick as you can. But if it's just like a steady thing, I recommend, and this is just kind of my opinion over my own sort of personal testing, it's totally subjective, but like every 3 to 4 days, maybe go look at it, maybe once or twice a week. That should be enough. There are some tools out there that you can try that are changing your fees like all the time. I don't really recommend those, but those exist.
One thing that I remember is important to do is to have your opening fee rate set, because a lot of the
Yes.
the standard defaults are like 1 ppm, and so you open the channel to loop and they just steal your liquidity and you don't want to do that. So you need to make sure and then you've got like.
This is a great point, and what's really cool is ThunderHub, one of the newer ThunderHub versions, lets you set that fee rate when you open the channel. But you can also put it in your configuration file.
Code it in.
You can also set that fee rate if you're opening a channel through Terminal Web at Open also to start it off. Depending, like you said, what you're expecting out of it. Now, if you don't care about earning anything though, you're just running a node for spending or receiving. Yeah, Michael.
When you choose that fee rate at Open, do you look at the median that is pointing to that node and kind of undercut, or like what's your strategy there?
Yeah, so honestly, I don't really look at it too carefully personally. I'm one of these guys. 1,000 is like my base unless I know it's going to be a drainer, and I'm going to let it sit for like a week, and then I'm going to adjust based on that. I'm not, I want to try to find that sweet spot, and my node might be well connected enough that all the channel fee set on average or whatever on that is less than what I could possibly do. So that's a really good question though. Yeah, and so if you don't care about earning, it's still important to set your fee rates in a way that doesn't allow other people in that. So here's like my final big point, right? There are people out there, I might or might not be one of them, that is constantly looking at ways to pull people's liquidity from destinations that I think that they are setting fees too low of. So I can pull that liquidity into my channels and then set the fee rate higher. This is very important for an efficient node, not a node that's necessarily a routing node, to be aware that these people are out there. So if you open up a channel to bid refill and you don't care about routing payments or whatever, you should still probably set your fee rate pretty high because people are going to try to pull that liquidity out of your node by doing things like the self-payment rebalances and stuff. So that's another thing that people do on an advanced scale. So you can think of fee rates as a wall that other nodes have to climb to get to your liquidity, if that's a visualization that helps. And then closing channels, this is pretty easy. If your channel's offline for a long time, I would say like 30 days, you should probably close it. Unfortunately, that would be a forced close, so you're not going to get your capital back for a week or so, depending on how big the channel is. But always do the cooperative close if given an option. A cooperative close is when you and your peer agree on the state of your channel, and you can just broadcast a normal transaction to close the channel. And the only real reason you probably want to do that is if you have a lot of capital in that channel and you just feel like it's not doing anything, even though you think it should be, and you want to kind of point it somewhere else. Not everybody has infinite Bitcoin. Nobody has infinite Bitcoin. But if you have a decent channel that's been open for months, and you notice it's not doing anything, close it and open up a channel to another peer, see if that does better. There's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes random force closes happen. Sometimes there's a disagreement between peers that you can't control. It's kind of advanced, but don't be surprised if random force closes sometimes happen, unfortunately. In a high on-chain fee environment that we experienced a few months ago, it's especially scary because who knows if the random force close is going to be broadcasted with a fee rate that is not going to get confirmed for a long time. So this is another reason why having channels with good peers is very important. And, okay, we made it. You can do it. Your goals are going to be different, but your goals are going to be your own. So make them and grow and learn. There's plenty of communities, Bloodnet, Voltage Discord.
KYCJ.com.
There we go. And in my opinion, every Bitcoiner that has a solid understanding of how on-chain works, the next step is trying to run a Lightning node and getting an understanding on that. Because it's just the layer 2 protocol that's just miles ahead right now. And even if something better comes along, it's still worth learning about and running. Because, like I said, who knows? Like, the Lightning Network's not perfect. There's a lot of issues that a lot of developers are working on fixing. But it still has the potential to be the payment rails of the entire world. And if you want to be a part of that, you can do that today. And I hope I can say that same statement in 10 years, but I probably won't be able to. So it's really cool to be able to run your own Lightning node and be the back-end wallet for like your friends and family with things like Lightning Node Connect and LND Connect and LNbits and all this stuff. So give it a shot, try it out, and I guess let me know if you have any questions. I don't think we have much time, but
if you have any questions, please raise your hand and I'll bring one to you.
How do you think about channel sizing versus on-chain fees? The relation, especially with like the dynamic fee market we've seen recently.
yeah, I mean, depending on, so to open a channel, you need to do an on-chain transaction. So if the standard on-chain fee rate, if you do the math on how many total, the fee rate doesn't really matter as much as the actual amount of sats that you're using to open the channel with, and you can do the math on that, whatever, but if it's like $4 or $5 roughly translated, and you are opening up a channel, the bigger channel that you open means the lower fee rate you have to set on that channel, or if that channel were to earn routing fees, you would get that open back. And that's kind of a good default also that I probably should have mentioned earlier. If you don't want to play the whole try to find the equilibrium game, set your fee rate, your default fee rate at the amount that the equation of whatever fee you paid to open the channel, maybe plus a little bit more just in case it closes or whatever. Multiply that, divide that by the size of the channel, multiply that by 1 million, and set your fee rate at that.
That's my exact strategy. Right?
Yeah, that's a good strategy. That works. Yeah, so you can do that too. So as you guys can tell, there's many ways to sort of accomplish these things, but it's really fun to get in there and try it out. And regardless, this isn't a scientific number, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of Lightning nodes on the network are quote unquote not profitable. So it's a very novel new world right now. In my opinion, I think fee rates on the Lightning Network should be a lot higher overall, but we just haven't reached the amount of volume that the Lightning Network should be at in the future. So I think in the future it's actually going to be, on-chain is going to be super expensive, but Lightning Network's not going to be free and cheap as it is today. So
Let's have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you. If my goal is not to be a routing node, but just to use for payments and to have the most privacy, and so is there any reason to have more than one channel? Let's say I'm just connected to a well-connected channel peer, and would that suffice just for sending and receiving payments? And one more thing on top of that is, can you talk about the difference between being unannounced channel versus public channel?
Yeah. So that first one there, I would say if your payments are succeeding, awesome. It's not succeeding, if you're paying the same destination over and over and it's like working, that's great. I would only open another channel in that scenario if your outbound totally drained out. But if it's only working some of the time or whatever, I would consider opening up extra channels. I wouldn't suggest closing that channel, but opening up a couple more channels might help. Just find other routes to that destination. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
If you can talk about unannounced channels and how that affects privacy.
Sure. So an unannounced channel is a channel that is. So let's talk about an announced channel. So an announced channel or a public channel is a channel that the entire network is going to see. It's going to see the total capacity of that channel. It's not going to see who owns what part of that capacity, but it will see the total capacity. And you'll be able to forward payments through that. A unannounced channel, you can't forward payments through, and theoretically, only your peer is going to know that channel exists. However, there is a lot of research on this. This is why we used to call it a private channel, but I'm calling it an unannounced channel, because it's not necessarily private. There are ways to send fake payments out to the network. This is called probing, and sort of find these unannounced channels out on the network. So private channels or unannounced channels are useful if you and someone else are just like constantly sending back and forth, and you really don't care about anything else. You just want to have your own little thing. You can do that. But that's the major difference. In this talk and stuff, I'm assuming everything is public and announced. I guess that's all, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something. And,